Some people beat diabetes quickly, and for others, it takes a bit longer. Well, I hope you were able to see the video interview I did with Preston Rutherford. I think it was last Friday. And it was a great interview. Preston did such a fantastic job of beating diabetes. And the thing that was so amazing was he had severe diabetes with an A1C of 10.4. I'd call that pretty severe. And yet he beat it in a hurry and drove it down to 4.8 in about 3.5 months. And after the interview was over and I was thinking about that, I thought, a lot of people may be a little discouraged as to why some beat it so quickly and for others it takes longer. And why was it that people like Preston and others can be so quick in getting that A1C down close to almost perfect? So I jotted down a few notes based on observations that I have made and people I have interacted with, and I interact with a lot of diabetics. I read their comments, they email me, I email them. So based on stories I've heard and people who've talked to me about their situations and interviews that I've done, I just jotted down some of my observations about why some people can beat it so quickly, and they typically fall into the exact same category as Preston. So let me just give you about 6 reasons why I feel, and Preston, if you're watching this and you have anything to add, feel free to add it, but here's some reasons I feel he was able to beat it so fast and so thoroughly. Number 1, he's relatively young. Now, for some people in their 20s, a man in his 40s is not that young, but really in the diabetes world, 40s is pretty young, a lot younger than many of the people that I hear from. Secondly, he was overweight to begin with. You might say, well, that's a negative, right? That's not a positive. Well, it's a positive in this sense. People that are overweight and can shed weight in a hurry, as Preston did, he lost 70 pounds in that 3.5 months. They typically see amazing results in their A1C, in their fasting glucose, and so forth. So he was overweight. People that are thin and find out they've got diabetes often have a much harder time of it to beat it, and to beat it quickly, as people that are overweight, significantly overweight, and then they lose that weight in a fairly rapid period of time. Those are the ones you typically see the best results from. So if you are overweight and you just found out you have diabetes, well, in a way that puts you in a category where you might be able to beat it a little quicker or maybe a lot faster than someone who is thin or just a normal size and finds out they have diabetes. Now, what if you are thin or normal size and you have diabetes? What does that mean? Well, it could mean a number of things. It could mean you've got a problem with some of your beta cells having died or become dysfunctional. And it could be that you're what some people call TOFI, which is the letters T-O-F-I, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. You may have a lot of fat on your organs, particularly your liver and pancreas, that can really cause diabetic problems. And yet on the outside, you are thin or you're just normal. So there are several reasons, but there's almost one thing that is for sure. Overweight people that can lose a lot of weight typically see very fast results. And of course, in most cases with people I interact with, they're not even trying to lose weight so much. They're just trying to get that A1C down. But in the process of going low carb and cutting out the carbs, they lose weight like crazy. Very, very normal. And that's what happened with Preston. He went from 365, he went from 265 to 195 in 3.5 months. So he definitely fit in that category. So a third factor, I believe, is he caught his problem fairly early on. Just a year and a half before, he had a 5.4 A1C, and in 18 months' time, he jumps to a 10.4. So we don't know exactly when it really started to shoot up, and that curve really, hit the fan. But at some point in that 18-month period, it just took off. But he was not like someone who's had diabetes for 15, 20 years, had sky-high blood sugar for all that time. If you've had it for a long time, probably you're going to have a little harder time getting that number down. A fourth reason, he was ruthless in his approach to beat diabetes. I mean, he got incredibly aggressive and ruthless about beating it to the point where he would hardly eat any carbs. He just pretty much went cold turkey on the carbs. Ruthless. And that's a good kind of a ruthless. In most cases in life, being ruthless is not a compliment. It's not a good thing. But when it comes to beating diabetes, ruthless is an excellent thing. And he's starting to do a few minor adjustments now, and he's lightening up a little bit. But he was incredibly ruthless, and it paid off. Number 5, he tested his glucose like crazy, which is a sign that you are highly motivated. He was testing all the time, and he got to the point where he's only eating one meal a day, and he was still testing like 8, 10 times a day. So that was a definite factor. And, testing yourself and being motivated are sort of like the opposite of a vicious cycle. I guess you could call it a blessed cycle, because the more you test yourself and see what foods do to you, the more eager and motivated you are to beat the thing, especially when you see that certain meals and certain foods have almost no effect on your blood sugar, and then other ones have a tremendous effect, and they spike you like crazy. So the more you test, the more motivated you are, and the more motivated you are, the more you test, and that's what he was in that blessed cycle, and it paid off big time for him. And then lastly, he didn't cheat. Just didn't cheat. Went 3.5 months and did not cheat. He was able, and this amazed me, and it certainly goes beyond my own experience, he was able to keep his glucose under 100 nonstop for most of that 3.5 months, not all of it, I think, as he first got into it, but for most of that time, he was under 100, even as his post-meal glucose would spike. Well, you couldn't call it a spike, really, if it stays under 100. But he just didn't cheat at all. And we pay for it if we cheat. Maybe the day will come when you've got things under such perfect control that you can go a little easy and do a few things you otherwise wouldn't do. But I'll tell you what, when you're fighting for your life, which he was, and every diabetic is, when your numbers are really high, you don't want to cheat. So first, let me make a couple of points. First point is, there's good news. If you fit in Preston's category, if you're in your 30s or 40s and you're overweight and you found out you've got big diabetes, the good news is you could probably beat that sucker pretty quick just by doing some of the things he did. And as that weight drops off and you cut those carbs and you do the time-restricted eating or go to OMAD or go to 2MAD or BIMAD or whatever you would call that, you can beat diabetes fairly quickly in most cases. Obviously, there's no guarantees, and I don't know your case, and I wouldn't tell you if I did, but for most, my observation is for most overweight, younger, 30s and 40s diabetics, it is not going to take that long for you to get those numbers down into the non-diabetic range. Now, that's the good news. But you may say, well, yeah, so that means the bad news is I'm not overweight and I'm old. I'm 68 or 65 or whatever, and I'm not even overweight. So what's going on with me? Well, I can't answer what's going on with you, but the good news is you can't do anything about your age for sure. And if you're not overweight, you don't want to just get skinny as a beanpole, as my dad used to say. But you can be aggressive and ruthless for sure. You can be highly motivated. You can test yourself. You can avoid cheating. And let me focus on just set a goal for 3 months and say, for the next 3 months, I'm not going to cheat. It's going to be low carb, time-restricted eating. My preference is about a 6-hour window, starting around 12 to 1, ending your final meal somewhere around 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And you do that, and don't eat in between those two meals. When I say a 6-hour window of eating, I mean you eat at the beginning, you eat at the end, and nothing in between. You can do all that. Like I said, you can't do anything about your age, but you can do something about all that. And the other thing is, if it takes longer for you, you may say, well, man, Dennis, I've been at this for 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, and I'm still struggling. And my glucose is at 150, 160. When I wake up in the morning, it gets a little better, but I'm not at all happy with my fasting glucose. And I sure can't report a testimony like Preston can. Well, maybe not, but you can still beat it. We hear from old people, young people. We had an 85-year-old lady came on our show and was interviewed. And she beat it in her 80s. So you can beat it for sure. And if it takes you longer, well, guess what? This is not a contest. You're not in a competition with Preston or anybody else. The main thing is you start moving the right direction and get there as quick as you can. If I'm in Mexico and I'm walking to Toronto, Canada, it's going to take me quite a bit longer to get to Toronto than if I'm in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm going to Toronto. But as long as I'm going north and I'm headed for Toronto, that's the important thing. I can't sprint all the way from Mexico up to Toronto. Nobody can sprint that far. And beating diabetes is not a sprint. It's more of a marathon. It's more of establish a certain rhythm, a certain diet, a certain lifestyle, and just stay with it. On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Next month, next year, just stay with it. Keep going the right direction. And we hear so many reports. I just don't think there's any reason you cannot win as well. Probably most of you know my wife Benedicta, but few of you know the amazing paths God has led her to bring her to where she is today. Benedicta was orphaned at an early age and lived with an elderly stepmother growing to adolescence. They were so poor, Benedicta had to drop out of school and sell food door to door for them to survive. As a teen, Benedicta got a job as a housemaid, which developed into a nightmare. She was required to cook, clean, wash, take care of the children, and she had to get up at 4 a.m. every day just to get her work started. Worse than that, she was frequently beaten. At around 20, she moved to the huge city of Lagos, where she started her own little business. Sometimes she prospered, but at other times she nearly starved and went days at a time without eating. At one point, she became so sick she passed out in her room and nearly died. She found herself outside of her body, and she was able to see the splendors of heaven until she was sent back with a command to share her story. One day, however, her life changed when an American evangelist came to her community to preach, and of course, that was me. The rest, as they say, is history. Benedicta has shared her life story in a recently published autobiography, and you can get it on Amazon as either an ebook or a paperback. A link to this book on Amazon is in the description.